Alright, hello students, and today we are going to look at something a little bit more complicated. We are going to look at how war impacts society. Now, generally wars you see borders change, this country gets a new name, this is taken over, this has become someone else's, and it's easy to see on a map, what happened. This was before, this was after. It's clear and concise, but what we want to look at today is something a little bit more difficult to grasp. The idea of societal changes that occur because of war. So what we're going to look at is one aspect of society, and specifically what we're going to look at today is gender, and more specifically we're going to look at masculinity, so what it means to be masculine. And we're going to define what that means and then look at the time period leading up to World War I. And then from there we are going to define what it was to be masculine, and later we're going to do our first assignment, and then we're going to later look at how World War I changed this idea. So first things first, gender is the concept that genders have roles. So you were born either a male or a female, and that's just the way you're born, but society says that this is the way men should act, and that's masculine, and this is the way that females should act, and that's feminine. So we have there this social construct of what you should do, how you should act based on how you were born. So we're going to look at just France, and while this would have been similar for a lot of the countries that will be in World War I, we're going to look specifically at France because we want to kind of narrow this view down and get a clear idea of how war can change this one aspect of society in this one place. And then, that way it would be easier to look at other changes, other ways, but we're going to just focus for right now. So we need to look, and we're going to look back at, from the French Revolution, a little bit into the Napoleon's era, and then a little bit into the Franco-Prussian War, and then just a little bit right before World War I actually occurred, just a little anecdotal story to kind of illustrate the point as we get there. So with the French Revolution, we have, this new third estate that's forming to create, this new kind of government where the people vote and lead, and not just nobility and clergy are in charge of the country. It is political aspects. The masculine is very clear. The men are the politicians. If you are a female, you cannot be a politician. You can still take place in the talks and debates and things that are done outside of actual political sphere, and they were actually generally encouraged to be part of the idea process of creating what they would want for the French Revolution, but not the political sphere. And while they were also part of the fighting, females and males, the role that females played in the actual combat parts of the French Revolution will be downplayed. So while they are definitely there, society kind of views them as the moral leaders. So you'll see this in artwork and things where you'll see the idea of a woman holding a weapon but not necessarily taking part in the combat. She's just clearly feminine, and she's leading the men who are taking part in the fighting. So they are the moral center, the moral guide. And this kind of comes from the idea of Lady Liberty from that time. So we have this idea of the Lady Liberty. She is the moral aspect of that. So this is what we're fighting for. We're fighting for, we the men are fighting for our women. Now moving on, we see this kind of the men keep fighting, and this kind of goes into men are military, men are the soldiers, and that's not really a stretch because men are the soldiers. They don't really take women soldiers for the most part. But what we have is that the idea that a man has to be that masculine soldier who is courageous, and the French are known for their kind of charges into battle bravely, and so you have to be that aspect of it. And so even if you are that person, you can easily lose your masculinity in certain other ways. Napoleon, for example, he was a general at the time, so he wasn't yet emperor, but still he was very much the idea of what you should be as a masculine. in French society at the time, but because his wife had cheated on him, and he was writing his brother, and he was very emotional in what he was writing, and those letters were intercepted by British. They published the letters to embarrass him, and he was humiliated on the kind of a European global scale. And so just because he was emotional and had feelings for his wife, he was less of a man, less masculine. And so it's easy to see that these little things can change what masculinity is. So even if you are performing the role correctly, you might be missing something else, and then you just lose your masculinity. Even Napoleon could, and you'll see this again with Napoleon later in life. His wife can't produce male heirs, so he has to divorce her and remarry, even though he clearly loved his first wife and did not want to do that. He needed the male heirs. And this is another part that's going to kind of come up again later, is the idea of having male heirs, or even just heirs in general. You needed to be able to produce children to be masculine. And with the kind of crisis that they'll have later, we'll see that they have a crisis of where they don't believe they are masculine because they're not making enough babies. And number-wise, that's not really true, but the idea was there, and it impacted how people acted in society. So from that, we see, Napoleon, even though he was the emperor, he was the masculine man, this is what you should be as a man, he still had the pressures of society dictate his actions and kind of change what he was doing. And so as you move into the Franco-Prussian War, which is much later after Napoleon, France is fighting this new country, this new united German nation, which is mostly Prussia. This is going to become Germany, and the French fights them. And the French, they had been the #1 in Napoleon's time, and they were expected to beat Prussia in this war. Prussia just completely crushed France, and this causes another kind of crisis for masculinity, because this soldier ideal of masculinity had just kind of fallen off, and this idea again of having male heirs comes up. The Germans are just able to have more babies, they're more masculine, they're bigger, they're hairier, they're having more babies, they're more masculine than us. Our men need to change to be more masculine. And this kind of creates a crisis of what is masculine, what is feminine, how should our men react, how should our men act. And it kind of it's really stressed leading into World War I, mainly because of the loss to Prussia, because that loss in their minds shouldn't have happened. They should have been the more masculine army, and that would mean that they win. And so this is going to create a kind of interesting idea of what a man should be. He should be a courageous, he runs into the fight, he's into the charge, he's having lots of babies, and he is that courageous leader in the military. So he is a soldier, and he is brave, and he also has babies. And this is going to be stressed, and the idea of something that's going to come up, and you need to know this term. It's a poilu, P-O-I-L-U. It literally means hairy. So to be masculine, you need to have a lot of hair. But the idea is that you are this hairy, big, brave soldier who will be fighting for France, and that's what makes you a man. If you are that, you are a man, or masculine. And so this notion is very fragile, because this is what France wants to be, not necessarily what it thinks it is, because it just lost to Prussia. So this is what it's trying to become. And you can see societies kind of react when this idea of masculine and feminine is challenged. They kind of fall apart. And I want to explain, right before World War I, there is this case of Madame Caillaux, and she is married to a politician. He had married before, divorced and remarried this Madame Caillaux, and he had written her several love letters before he had married her, professing his love, explaining his emotions, and just saying that he loved her, and all these other things that you would imagine would be in a love note. And these letters were found by a newspaper who was against that politician. So his political viewpoints were different. So in a way to discredit that politician, he published these love letters. So again, like Napoleon, we see, even if he is doing the masculine thing of, you know, having a family, being political, he has these emotions and these feelings that make him clearly not masculine. This is too feminine. This guy can't be trusted running the country. He is too unmasculine. And his wife knew that the husband wouldn't do anything about it. The husband would just roll over and take that hit. So what she did was she got a gun and she went to the newspaper's place and shot the man, just killed him right there. And what happened was she waited for the police. The police came. They tried to arrest her, and she said, "Can I drive myself to the police station?" And the police let her. So she was able to commit murder and drive herself to the police station. Now, she admits to the shooting him. There's not really any doubt that that happened. But in her trial, her defense lawyers, what they will do is they'll say, well, women can't commit murder. This is just hysteria. She couldn't control herself. She's a woman. She's not capable of calm, calculated murder. Now, women had already been, in the past, convicted of murder. So women had murdered someone. Everyone knew it was murder. That was the end of it. They were in jail. But at this point in time, France as a society was willing to say, yes, women can't commit murder because our idea of masculine is so fragile right now that it needs to be upheld. So she was able to get away with murder by saying women can't commit murder. And then that right as that case really ends, and this was actually a very famous case. It was followed in all the news outlets of France. So France as a whole was kind of on board with this idea that, well, women can't commit murder because that's too masculine a thing. And that's just to show you how fragile the gender roles were and how important it is for society to maintain them. If they start falling away, they will react in such a way to overcompensate so that the gender roles can be reestablished as the way they were. So next what we're going to look at is how this idea of the courageous, brave soldier, the politician, how this is going to be stressed by World War I. But what you need to do right now is your assignment for this week will be to find a primary source. It can be a picture, it can be writings, anything that you can use that you can say that this shows clearly French gender roles around 1900 to World War II, anytime at that point, to show what the gender roles were or how they were being changed. So find a primary source, find one that you like. You need to write 500 words about it, just describing it and how it actually shows this kind of gender identity, preferably for masculine, but if you need to find one for feminine, that's fine, because what is masculine cannot be feminine, so the two kind of play off each other. Once you have got yours and you've written yours up, you need to post it or present it, and then what we'll do is you need to also write a response to 2 other people's postings as well, so that you need to kind of have a web of sources that you can use later for our next assignment that are all primary sources and they all show gender identity. So again, 500 words about their other person's source, how you could use this source, how it does show gender, what does it mean, and kind of give feedback as well. So use that assignment to create that. And then next time we will look at how World War I actually changes the idea of masculinity.